Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for today's ASA web seminar, Prepare to Care, Creating an Aging Roadmap, which is part of the Empowering Professionals in Aging series presented by Home Instead. We'll be getting started shortly. The slides for today's presentation are available under the tab on your screen labeled Resources. And under the tab labeled CE Application here, you'll find information on how to obtain CE credit for this event. You'll have 60 days to complete a continuing education application, and it may take up to 30 days from the date of your application in order for us to process and issue your CE credit. If you're not logged in directly to this web seminar, that is if you're watching as part of a group and did not log in using an individual confirmation URL, you will not be eligible for continuing education credit because we have no way to track your online attendance. If you'd like to receive CE credit, please be sure you log in using the confirmation URL you received after individually registering. If you have questions during the presentation, you can send those at any time using the questions box, and we'll save those for the last 10 to 15 minutes of today's program. And now I'd like to welcome today's presenter. April Ibarra is a gerontologist and strategic partnerships manager for Home Instead, with over 25 years experience in health care and aging. April is passionate about improving the lives of older adults through advocating, educating, and providing resources to help them live their highest quality and most independent life. Welcome, April.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here today to kick off this series for 2021. So I'd like to wish everyone a very happy new year and say thank you for taking time today to participate in this webinar. And it's actually a topic I'm extremely passionate about. I'm obviously passionate about aging, but when it comes to creating an aging roadmap, I get pretty excited. So hold on to your hats. I'll try not to overwhelm you. If anything, 2020 has taught us that anything can happen, right? We never could have predicted what 2020 would bring to our lives, to the lives of seniors, but we do know that we can prepare for our aging experience. And that's why, to me, this is so important. And I hope that you will also get excited about this, whether it be for your own life as you are aging, for your aging relatives and family members, or your clients, residents, people that you're taking care of, helping them to look into the future to determine what their aging experience would like to, what they would like it to look like is very empowering. Again, I'm a gerontologist, so I look at everything from the aging perspective. So it gets me excited to help people become more enthusiastic about the planning process. So got a lot of things we're going to cover. Again, that's me. Let's take a look at the objectives. We have quite a few things we're going to go over, but just so that you will know what to expect. We're going to start by reviewing the aging process, what to expect as an older adult progresses from independence to needing more support. We're going to explore tools that help aging adults develop a plan to help them prepare for their long-term care needs as they age. We're also going to learn how to help families guide the conversation. Families are a critical role in this process, even though the plan is really for what the older adult wants to experience. But the families are vital, and these conversations can be very difficult. So we're going to help them give some tools to guide them. And we also will close by kind of talking about some trends and products and services to support the increasing needs of older adults as they want to choose to live in place. So a lot to cover, so let's get started. Failure to plan, and boy, failure is a really, it's a negative word. I just read something in an article that said, should we use the word failure? But nonetheless, it's here, and it's important to know that if we don't plan, if we don't anticipate what the aging experience is going to look like, there's going to be consequences. And I think the statistics are alarming, in my opinion, that only half of older adults have planned or have thought about developing a care plan for themselves. And I think as we go through this presentation, you'll see a little bit more about what is just what a plan is. It's not just how do I want my end of life to look, or how are my finances looking. It's everything from how I plan to age, where I live, activities, community that I want to participate. It's really envisioning what life looks like as we age. Again, the plan is for the older adults, but adult children are vitally important and are also involved. And 73% of adult children have neither planned nor thought about care. Now, remember, I said I'm a gerontologist, so I may have some biases. I definitely feel that older adults are the ones who are driving this plan. Families are important, but really it comes down to the wishes of the older adults, and we'll get into a little bit more about that. And I think it's interesting that obviously we know most older adults say, I don't want to be a burden, right? But many of them still have not discussed any of their preferences at all. So without a plan, it really puts everything into crisis mode. And I can imagine for people on this call, you deal with crisis every day, not only with the clients that you manage or that you work with, but also with their families. So there's a lot we can do. And what happens? Why don't more people think about planning for their future of the aging? That's a question that continues to bother me, and maybe I'll make that my mission for this year, is to really continue to get people excited about planning, especially after the pandemic. And we know that our older adults are, the highest percentage of people who have died during COVID. We see the images of, families who can't see their loved ones because of COVID. And so there's so many reasons why understanding and thinking about the future is really, really important. So let's get into the details. I think it's important to understand a little bit more about the aging process. Now, if you're on this call, you probably work with aging clients. None of this is new for you. But what we have to remember and recognize is that the aging process is different for everyone. I am aging. I will be 57 this year. I'm having a little bit of trouble with that number. But I also recognize that as I look around, I tend to want to look at people who are my age and see, how do I compare to them, right? But we know that everyone progresses at a different rate. We cannot clump people together. I always get a little frustrated at research that on aging, and they'll say, oh, people 50 and older. Well, people 50 and older, if that includes people who are 70, 80, and 90, our needs, our experiences are completely different. So using just the term aging can always be a little challenging, but we have to recognize that everyone ages differently, and we can't just put a number on it. Changes tend to begin gradually, and then they accumulate, right? I have a neighbor, unfortunately, who just passed away, and he was 81, and I could see him out my window. And when we moved here, he was, late 70s, out working in the yard all the time, very active, very vibrant for a gentleman who was, about 78 at the time. And over time, as I was observing, just looking at him working in his yard and whatnot, I saw him begin to decline. What I didn't know is he had heart failure. So he had something that was going on that was moving his aging process along a little bit more. But it's interesting how they can begin gradually and then really start to accumulate, where somebody was doing fine, then all of a sudden they're not. So we have to recognize that that does happen, and we need to be prepared for, what are we going to do when things do start to change. And chronic conditions are a huge part of this. And again, we can't talk about anything in the world now without considering COVID, but all the people who have been impacted also, who have chronic diseases are have been more severely impacted. And older adults, 80% of them have at least one chronic condition, and 60% have two or more. And what we know about that, of course, is that they will never completely go away. They'll always be managing this chronic disease, and it also can severely impact the aging experience for that person. So those are just things that we need to recognize when we're looking at aging and what will happen in the future. So the big question begins to be, especially if you're dealing with the family members and people who are trying to support their loved ones, is when do I know that my loved one needs more care? How do I start to plan? How do I start to anticipate this? And we can assume that it's going to go from needing less care to needing more care, depending on the individual and circumstances. We can talk about living in a perfect world and what we can predict and things that will happen, but we also know things could happen any day. Cancer diagnosis, Parkinson's diagnosis, accidents, dementia. We never know. We can understand a little bit about our health history and our family's history, but we don't always know what's going to happen. But we can anticipate that at some point, if we're fortunate enough to age, things are going to start to change. Now, again, I have some biases. I am very much into wellness and health and doing everything we can to take care and do the best we can to age well, but also recognizing that sometimes some things are out of our control. So families tend to struggle with, what do I do about this? So we can kind of take a look at different categories of things that might begin to change where you're going to need perhaps a little bit more support. Maybe it's in the mental section, which is always alarming for families when they start to fear there's a lot of forgetfulness that impacts the daily life. The pots were left on the stove when mom was cooking dinner and they scorched. Medications aren't being taken. Bills are piling up. I was in the parking lot the other day and there was a woman who couldn't find her car, and she was quite elderly and she was very confused. And how frightening is that? So those things start to make themselves aware, and what are we going to do about it? So that's, a circumstance when we're probably going to need a little bit more support. We also are very, very aware now of the emotional and the social connections that people need. I don't know how you feel, but I feel extremely isolated. And as a social person and a social being, it's very challenging. There tends to be a reluctance to leave the house. We're withdrawing from social interactions, possible signs of depression. Obviously, during COVID, we're naturally forced to stay at home, especially for older adults who are at higher risk. But as you're just watching somebody age, be concerned if you're starting to see some of those trends. Even though they're not physical or mental, they're really going to impact the older adult and what they're going to need and how they're going to progress in their aging experience. And then, of course, there's always a physical side, right? Somebody starts losing interest in meals, and maybe that's because the spouse has died and they don't want to cook for themselves. Or, in my late mother's example, she had terrible dentures, and she just really stopped eating because of the pain, and that took a serious toll on her health. Driving skills, personal hygiene, unkept house. Things that, maybe used to be, very well managed, now we're starting to see a change. Why is that? Is it because they're depressed? Is it because they can't manage that? But these are all different things that could occur where we have to decide, okay, what kind of help can we offer to keep them independent? So I think those are really good things to think about. And then eventually, we really sometimes have to make a decision, when is it no longer safe or appropriate for someone to stay at home? Is this the time for someone to perhaps consider moving into a facility. And that's always, the toughest part, because many people promise their adult parents, I will not put you in a nursing home. And we know that people prefer staying at home. It's not always feasible. And I think the key things to think about here really is that forgetfulness, whether that's diagnosed in a dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, is really key. That's a risk to the safety. Refusal to accept professional help at home. Now, I talk about the aging person as the one who is in charge, but how frustrating is it for the family members, and I'm sure you've seen this 100 times, where the person refuses to accept help. We'll get into that a little bit more down the road as we try to present this, but I think it all goes back to what we're trying to do, is help the older adult take responsibility, understand what their needs are, and determine what they're willing to do to achieve those needs. Their care needs can go beyond the level of care in the home. When somebody really needs, more care that can be provided in the home, or they are unable to pay for the cost of 24 care, outside of outside of the home, inside the home, that's a problem, right? And then we have to take a look at who is available to help. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but, not at all families, it's not always a rosy picture. Not everybody has the greatest relationships. There's many dynamics of things that are going on. Family could be long distance. Family could be disengaged. That person could have no children. Solo agers is a big issue as we move forward. So there's lots of things that impact, okay, somebody wants to stay at home, but now are they able to? And when do we need to sort of look at other options? Starting the conversation is the hardest part. Obviously, we know people aren't planning, people aren't necessarily talking about it. Nobody, I think most people would just prefer to say, I don't want to deal with this now, I don't want to talk about it. That is not an option. We know that we're aging. We're fortunate that we're aging. If we're not growing older, then we're not alive, and that's just sort of the way we have to look at it. So we have to have the conversation, and there's a great tool that Home Instead actually put together called the 40/70 Guide. And really what this does is helps people to start the conversation. How do we get our aging loved ones, or how do you encourage your clients to start thinking about what they need before we're in crisis mode? And what we found through our research is that when you're 40, it's a really good time when your parents are possibly in their 70s. It's kind of an ideal time to start having some conversations. Earlier is better, and we want to do it before a crisis. Now, there's a flip side to this called the 70-40 rule, which is really sometimes the older adult is the one who wants to start the conversation, and the adult children simply don't want to talk about it. So, how do we get past these barriers? So I'm hoping that today is a good start, and that especially with what we've experienced in 2020, people are going to be a lot more willing and open to plan for their future. All right. I think this is just a great set of questions, because when we talk about an aging plan, it's not simply, as I mentioned before, the finances, the end of life discussion, the home, do I live there? It's the big picture. Me and my husband right now are actively looking forward to retirement soon. And what will that look like for us? And my husband surprised me and said he wants to go back to school and get his PhD in history. I'm like, why not? He's worked for a company for 30 plus years. That's his vision of what great aging looks like. So these questions are great ways to get started, and you have to sort of look at your own life and think, okay, how long do I expect to live? We know life expectancy is increasing, and there are ways that we can, extend that. Our family history, we have to kind of take a look at that. So if we know we're likely to live to 85 and, we're retiring at 60, what does that next 25 years look like? What do I look forward to about getting older? How can I use my wisdom to serve? I talk about retiring, but I really want to just engage in things that I'm passionate about, not stop living. And that's a whole nother interesting subject, is that more people are working as they are aging, some out of need, but some out of desire to actually still have a purpose and a function in life. And I think that's exciting if that's your goal. Of course, you want to look at the living arrangements. Okay, mom and dad have been in this house for, 45 years. It's not a good home to age in place. How are we going to address this? What are the legal and financial things we need to know? Just looking at some of the other ones, just being prepared. The last question here, who will pay for long-term care should you need it? People still have a very different understanding of who pays for what. And I think you all know this, that people still think that Medicare is going to pay for long-term care. They don't understand the difference between Medicaid and Medicare and what they're going to get from Social Security. So, we just need to be very realistic about what to expect, and assess the current situation, consider options, and talk about them. And we'll get into a little bit more details about that shortly. So the aging plan is about setting expectations. How do you want to age? How are you now physically? And what can I look at in the future? I was just talking about this the other day with my own health history. I don't know a lot about my father's side of his health. So, I can only go on what I know from my mother's side. But, if there's a history of Alzheimer's disease in your family, you have to factor that in. If there's a history of heart disease or diabetes or other issues, that's all part of, okay, here's what here's my living situation now. Here's what my health looks like, but here's what may happen in the future so that I can better plan for it. We want to, of course, talk about the legal and the financial, all the situations that you can see people have been in where they haven't planned and they have been, abused financially and in money matters by family. It's heartbreaking. Social and personal relationships. I have an aunt who's 76 years old and she is dating someone now. And, I think everybody's kind of like, what? I look at it, my aunt is a romantic. She wanted to have a romantic relationship in her life, and this was important to her. So just because she's 76 doesn't mean that having that personal connection wasn't important to her. And I'm actually going to do a presentation a little bit later this year on that very subject, because it's definitely something most people aren't comfortable talking about, but it's important. And, we have to recognize, okay, I'm aging. Do I think I'm going to be any different at 87 than I am at 57? I'm going to be the same person. I'm going to still have the same wants and needs. I'm just going to be older. And then, of course, end-of-life care is vitally important. If anybody here on the call is in the hospice industry, you understand people's fears of talking about end-of-life, and I think that is just so challenging because we need to also understand what we expect and what we want for the end of our life. And legacy is very important. So, there's so much. It's about how we want to live as we age. I mentioned this before. It's an acronym that really kind of helps families kind of take a look at the situation. And first, you need to understand the current and potentially future. So you're going to sort of assess what life is like. I talked earlier about planning ahead, starting early, but it's never too late. So even if you're dealing with clients who are, well into their 70s or 80s or 90s and they haven't really considered this, it's not too late. But we have to assess, what is the reality now? consider options and resources. What is available? Maybe you're in a community where there aren't a lot of healthcare options, and you just have a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. How does that change things for you? So we really need to consider the impact of the situation, and then we need to talk. And more importantly, we need to listen as healthcare professionals and family members, and we need to let the older adults talk about their fears, their concerns. I always say there's meaning behind behavior. So if somebody is being obstinate, difficult, stubborn, there's a reason. They're probably concerned. They're afraid to be honest with perhaps their healthcare professional or their family member because they don't want their independence to be taken away. And again, we're not talking about children. Older adults are people who are just grown older. And if they are able to make their own decisions, we should be able to help them to make a plan that best fits the reality of their situation. We want to be empathetic. And the entire goal really is to enhance their independence. I think the worst thing that we can do for older adults is to, what is the term? I don't want to say just baby them, but it's to force dependency, right? Oh, mom, don't do that. I'll do that for you. Or, oh, no, I don't want you to do that. I'm worried about you there. We don't want to force dependency on people. I think that's something that really is a bit of a problem. We want to make sure everything we do is maximizing independence. Okay, cost of care. Well, again, if we're not thinking about the future, most of us assume, well, I'm not going to need anything. And I think, we really need to accept that at some point there will be a cost associated with aging. We're living longer, which means that we're going to probably have to assume some cost associated with some type of care, especially in today's reality, in that, our healthcare systems are not paying for this. Medicare, is offering a few more things for older adults, but in essence, the cost of care needs to be planned for. Now, I recognize too, not everybody is going to have the money to pay for care. They didn't have the money when they were younger. They're not going to have the money when they're older. But that's all part of the reality of the planning, is to understand then what are resources available, who is available to help, but there is a cost to care. At some point, 70% of Americans are going to need some assistance. That's reality. And the cost is increasing. No surprise there. From 2004 to 2019, the cost for in-home care and facility care rose significantly. It's an increase of $892 for home care and up to $2,468 for private room and nursing home. So we know that the costs are not going to go down, and we know that we're going to need some care. So we've got to factor that in and make it a reality, and not just, not just assume that nope, we're not going to need anything. We're gonna die before we need care. That's just not reality. How is family involved? And this is interesting for me. Because again, we have to remember that not all families are healthy, have healthy dynamics, and that there's a lot of circumstances where the family may not be available to support. It's also interesting now, we're seeing a big number of people who are solo agers, who don't have family, don't have children. I personally don't have children, so of course I'm not planning that I'm going to have a group of resources or people to take care of me. So that's all part of looking at and assessing the situation and considering options. So, but this is where the family comes in. And I read something, one of the great studies that came out last year, Edward Jones, and I think it was Age Wave, the 4 pillars of retirement. And it was fascinating that most people, when it came to care, were assuming that their family was going to help them. But on the flip side, they didn't want to be a burden to their family. So how does that work? Right? But again, that's why digging in and really understanding all the circumstances there. Okay, so who's available to care? I have 2 daughters here in town. I have, son, who's across the country. 1 daughter works, 1 daughter doesn't. Who's available and willing, and how much time do they have to provide care? We know that caregiver burnout and caregiver burden is high, and people want to do they want to provide care, they want to do it, but there's a limit, especially when they're raising their own children. So, the proximity of caregivers, the time that they have, and, again, financial resources. If somebody, you've heard situations where the adult daughter perhaps, quit her job in order to take care of mom. That's wonderful if that is feasible, but it's not always. And, there's different levels of care. When we started talking about less care, some people will need a little bit, but then eventually they're going to need more. How comfortable are you as the caregiver helping mom on and off of the toilet, helping your spouse take a shower? There's just certain things that perhaps, family can do groceries and housekeeping and help with the physician appointments, but we need somebody in the home to help with the personal care. So that's all very personal, very individual, but things that definitely needs to be considered. All right. We've already talked a little bit about family, and again, this is interesting. I'd love to hear some of your perspectives on dealing with families. I did geriatric care management for a bit, and that was the biggest challenge, really, is dealing with the family. But in the best case scenario, you want to involve family because essentially they will probably be involved in some of the care. But it starts with the aging loved one. So these meetings do not occur, without them, or there could be discussions. But again, you cannot develop a plan or implement a plan without the older adult. And you want to start with what is the needs of the older adult. So it's good to start the conversations of what are the needs and assessing and considering, prioritizing the needs. Sometimes we have to choose and pick our battles. What's important to me may not be worth fighting about. Maybe it's the way dad keeps his house now that mom has passed. How important is that? Now, if he's hoarding and it's a safety risk, because we all, it seems like hoarding is a really, really big issue for older adults. I actually had a very good friend of mine from high school reach out to me. She knows I'm a gerontologist. She wanted to talk about her aging mother who was hoarding, who's 87 years old, who's been doing this forever, and who is actually quite hateful and spiteful. And so you have to really be aware of what's a safety risk and what's something you really should, fight your battles about. So you need to prioritize those. Not everything needs to be assessed or dealt with. Research your options, know what's available. We're going to do this ahead of time to avoid the crisis. Nothing worse than, mom just had a fall. Now she's in the hospital. She can't go back home. The home's not available. Now what do we do? That's the worst case scenario. Divide the workload. Not every family member is going to be good at all aspects of caregiving, but perhaps the daughter is very good at researching and interviewing caregivers. The son is he's good at the budget. Whatever. Divide the work and then plan as much as possible. We've talked a little bit about family dynamics. but I think it's worth discussing a little bit more. And I think this is, again, is one of the biggest challenges because not everybody is going to agree. And there's usually one sibling who takes the majority of the care. And, that's human nature, right? There can be 5 siblings and the one sibling takes care of the majority of the work and the other siblings, don't understand why, they do that or why she's mom's favorite or whatever. It doesn't matter. We just have to know that coming into it, we're dealing with all the family history that family has. And it's not going to change with this additional stress of trying to plan and manage for the aging experience. So just being aware and understanding that it's not always going to be rosy, that's okay. Family has always been, sort of dynamic or operated in this way. It's not going to be any different with dealing with, mom's new illness. And the top 5 hot buttons really include a couple things. Illness is one, right? So not everybody agrees. Mom has just been diagnosed with dementia, and half of the family agrees with that. The other half is like, nope, mom's fine. She's just got memory problems. I think about the show This Is Us, if anybody watches that program, when their mother was diagnosed. And the family was really on a very big disconnect on how to manage. The one son wanted everything to go just right. We got to get her into trials. We got to do this. The other son wanted to take her to Joan Baez's home so she could see where she lived, so she could live the best life that she had as she progressed in this disease. So that's stressful because everybody's going to have a different opinion, including, but most importantly, what is it that the older adult wants? In relationship to their newest illness. Finances. Boy, we don't have to go into that one too much. Finances and inheritance. It's amazing how challenging it can get when we're looking at the cost associated with care, what money is going to be left, who is it going to be left to. It's not pleasant to talk about, but it is a reality. It all goes to the family dynamics, and we have to be aware. But again, we're always trying to think of whatever's going on with the family is what is in the best interest of the older adult. Distance, big issue. I don't have stats on that, but we know that not all families live close enough to really be there. So that adds a lot of strain, especially if there's only one family member around who's available to help. And it's all very stressful. It's all very stressful. But again, if the more we talk about it, the more we plan for it, the more we communicate, the less stress it's going to be. I think most times the stress is a result of lack of communication and really understanding the changes and what's going to happen. Some tips for helping to communicate with aging parents. I think these are pretty simple, but first of all, we have to get started. That is the biggest challenge that we have right now with lack of planning, again, is that we're just not talking about it. We're not, and sometimes it can be as easy as, can we just plant a seed? This isn't a one and done type of thing. Okay, well, I've had it with dad's behavior. We're going to sit down and we're going to figure this out. That it doesn't usually work that way. And again, that's why starting sooner is better. Let's get started. Let's be ahead of the game here. Let's have time to talk these things through before, mom's at the hospital. She can't come home. Dad is at home with mild dementia, and now we've got a real mess on our hands. So talking it out sooner is better, and forget the baby talk. Again, this is a huge pet peeve. I've been in healthcare for many years. I've seen it. People will come into the room and they will address the adult children and not talk to the older adult who is the individual we're talking about. So, again, I just feel very strongly about that we want to, treat them as the adults that they are. And, it's tough because they don't always make the best decisions, right? We want to protect older adults. We want them to be safe. And when they continue to do things that put themselves at risk, we want to step in and intervene. And I think that's part of the nature of wanting to protect older adults. However, we're really trying to maximize their independence. We're trying to help them, and they should be allowed to make decisions. And they may not always be the best decision for safety or for or what you think. For example, my aunt dating, a lot of people were freaking out about that because she actually went on Match.com and started dating this gentleman, and then she went to Virginia with him, and people were like panicking. And I thought, you know what? She's a grown woman. She's 76 years old. She doesn't have any form of dementia. She's very cognitive. She is making decisions. So let's talk to her as an adult and not as a child. And again, we need to be aware of the whole situation. I mean, we can just look at the house that's a mess, or, whatever the situation is, and we have to put it into context. Many times when older adults lose their spouse of many years, it's heartbreaking when you think about you've been married for 40, 50 years and you lose your spouse. And, when you go into the home and you see dad is not showering and he's not cleaning up the house and he's not going out anymore, that's alarming. But understand the big picture here. He's grieving. So we can't just say, let's clean this house up, let's get you moving on. We look at the whole situation and help them move forward. Ask for help. That's the best thing a caregiver can do, is to be able to ask for help. Caregivers and older adults. It's very important that we really don't think that we can do this all alone. Look for resources, ask for help, support each other. We know that people want to remain at home. And I think it's going to be interesting as we, move into 2021 and the next decade of the history is what is it going to look like? And, healthcare itself has just evolved, right? Hospitals, the way they operate, long-term care facilities, the way things are paid for, it's just sort of been there. And, as somebody who's in gerontology, I'm consistently waiting for a bigger conversation on how are we going to manage our aging population in the future. We know that it's coming and, it's coming closer. What is it going to look like? And I think because of what we experienced last year, that I think it's going to get a lot more creative. And I think that's going to come from people who are setting expectations about what they want their life to look like as they get older. That's going to create needs. That's going to, force different options for people. And there's so many interesting trends that help support aging in place, and especially as it comes to technology and, everything that's available there. Virtual health blew up during during last year because people could not get out to the doctor's office. It wasn't safe for them. So all of a sudden, this is not new. Telehealth is not a new service, but it became very popular and now is being more reimbursed. I think, I see older adults every day spending their entire day trying to get out to the doctor's office to get their prescriptions. That takes the entire day. So virtual health is a great new, opportunity that I think is going to help Tech-enabled care organizations are setting up a lot of different things because we know isolation and loneliness is a big concern, and especially now, and it's not going to go away right away. So there's a lot of different exciting things that organizations are doing to reach out and connect with older adults in their home. Smart homes, are going to be great. And now we're recognizing that not everybody has access to broadband. So I think we're going to be looking more at how do we make sure that everyone has access so they can use tablets, for their virtual health, or they can, have resources to communicate with people when they can't get home. Hospital at home. We're looking at more and more care being provided in the home. And I think that's going to be a trend that we're going to see soon. Best Buy is becoming, is getting into the healthcare market, and they're really looking at, from a consumerism standpoint, people are looking at what is available for me to stay at home, and how can I purchase some of these things to make my life better as I age. So I think we're going to see a lot of trends. I think they're going to come out of a demand for things to be a little bit different, and I think it's going to be very excited to see. So who knows? I'd love to hear from you. And I think, I love this quote. It's not how much you do, but how much love you put into the doing. Everybody who works with older adults feels like, gosh, I wish there was more I could do. Families who are caregivers wish there was more that they could do. But sometimes that's just not feasible. But it's the love, and it's the care, and it's the intention of trying to improve the lives of our older adults while also respecting their requests, their desires, and helping to support their aging experience. So I've went through a lot of information in a short period of time. I know that there are a couple of questions coming in, and I would love to hear from you, thoughts, your own opinions on things we've talked about. So I'll turn it over now to answer any questions. And I'm just looking at the one who's here. Do you think having a president who's nearly 80 years old may change people's thinking about aging? Well, my answer to that is going to be, holy heck, I hope so, because it's not about the age, it's about the experience, it's about what people bring. I just finished a fantastic book called Wisdom at Work, and if you haven't read it, I would recommend it. It's by Chip Conley. And it really talks about, again, the aging experience after people retire. And I think, it's looking so much different. We have so much more to offer. And not everybody who retires well. They want to continue offering and giving things back. So I thought that was a great book. And so, yes, I think having a president who's nearly 80 years old should make us take a look at, what, we're not done yet. What is hospital at home? That's just a trend where more care is being done in the home, right? There are physicians who are going into the home. I think there's more technology so that different types of services can be in the home. And, look at hospitals now and how overwhelmed they are with COVID. And before all this happened, hospitals were in a bit of a crisis, right? Trying to manage the cost associated with the care that they were giving. It's a fascinating subject, but the trend itself is, I think, more care is going to be done in the home. Looking at additional questions, I'll make sure I get to all these. How do we push for change without being too pushy? I like that question. And older adults I've always been I've been working with them since I was 18. I'm a magnet for older adults. So I think part of it is we put the ball back in their court. So a lot of times when people say, for example, well, I don't want to end up in a nursing home. I'm like, okay, so tell me what you do want and what are you willing to do to make sure that your dreams come true, that your wishes come true? Are you willing to take, responsibility for your health? Are you willing to, start exercising so that your muscles are strong to take care of yourself? And so it's really about understanding their goals, but then also putting them in charge of, of what that activity or what that outcome will look like. So I think when we try to say, oh, these throw rugs have got to go because they're a falls risk, or, oh, you can't date, you're too old, I'm worried about you. That's not the approach. You treat them like an adult, and then you let them also know the risks and the circumstances of decisions. In general, that's how I would answer that. I'm just going to go down the list here, if that's okay, as I'm looking. What's being done to train professional caregivers to provide effective care for people at home who have different types of dementia, different systems and challenges? I think, that's a good question. I know at Home Instead, we have a very effective caregiver training program to deal with types of dementia. It's no surprise that we're going to be dealing with more and more types of dementia. And I think home care organizations certainly understand that. I think it's a lot more difficult in, I will say, health systems because, if somebody's in the hospital and you don't know that person's history or how they behave, how do you know what's it's just harder to communicate. But I think from a home care perspective, organizations are doing a great job, and I think we need more education also so family caregivers can better understand, how to manage. Let's see. My siblings and I took care of my father for 6 years. And you are correct with regards to all not siblings think alike, but we did manage. Yeah, that's it. It's a compromise, right? But it's not necessarily what we want. It's what's in the best interest of the older adult. It's a fascinating subject. 76 and still working. Yay, love that. Is the medical education community doing anything to attract more students to pursue gerontology, geriatrics? That's a good question. I don't think I have an answer for that, but I know it's important. And I know even at Home Instead, we actually have an initiative through our foundation that really encourages students to get involved and understand careers. I'm always willing to talk to somebody, anyone who's interested in getting into the industry. Like I said, I had an undergrad degree in health promotion and wellness and gerontology, went back and got my master's. And for some reason, it's just, I can't think of anything I'd rather do. And we need more people who understand geriatrics and gerontology. It's critical. All right, we've got a few more minutes, so I'm just going to keep reading if that's okay. The stigma of aging tends to lead to thinking of dying. Should we teach more on the positivity that planning doesn't mean the end of life? Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Because to me, people don't want to talk about aging because they think it's negative. They don't think of it as positive. I think, okay, I know I'm a gerontologist. I know I'm maybe different. But when I think about aging, I'm like so excited because I first finally have, the experience and the knowledge and the wisdom. I now am more financially stable and I can decide what my life wants to look like. So I think, we can emulate that, right? Everybody on this call can emulate, what it looks like. And again, there's a dark side to aging as well. It's difficult. I mentioned that my neighbor who I saw died over the holiday, and I struggled with that. But I also knew that he was older. He had a health history, he had a great life. They really planned for things. So it's a natural. part of life. And I think him and his wife both felt that, yes, their life was wonderful, but eventually we all do die. But how can we take those final years of our life and be just incredibly engaged and happy and living the best life that we can? And again, that's very, very individual. Do you think our healthcare system will transition to more of us aging in place? I think that just depends on, it all comes down to, the needs, how it gets paid for. Nursing homes this year obviously got a very, very difficult situation with dealing with COVID. I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe that people should be able to age in place, but you also have to recognize that you're going to need help and resources, and there could be a time when it's no longer appropriate. So again, it's just understanding the realities. Are there checklist resources for family caregivers to help ask questions and keep our aging in track for good living? Yeah, there are a couple of resources that I really like about aging planning, and my email is in the PowerPoint. If you would like to email me, I can share with you some resources that I think are good guides. Happy to do that. And I know we're running out of time. The 4070 guidebook is available, and you can look that up, or you can send me an email. But it's the 4070 resource guide, and I think you can find that we've changed our website a little bit, but you can Google Home Instead Senior Care 4070 guide. You should be able to find it, or shoot me an email. And any books you can recommend? My 86-year-old mother is going to be staying with us for the winter. Books to recommend that help with transition. I'm going to have to think about that one. So I think that came from Wendy. Wendy, if you want to shoot me an email, and I can put some thought into that. Good questions. I know we're just about out of time. As a senior care professional, how do you walk the fine line of getting help for your loved ones but not burning bridges with your colleagues and associates? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I understand that completely, but boy, it's tough to be the senior care professional in dealing with your aging loved ones, because you're still family, right? And I'm not quite sure how to answer that one, so I'll move on. But you're happy to reach out to me. Benefits of planning can't be overstated. It allowed me to step in and help my parents. Oh, that's great. We always think about the legal and medical documents, and those are essential, but so much more. Is it a good point of reference to suggest caregivers look to the medical professionals on next levels of care? I would say yes. If you have a good relationship with your medical professional, I would love that they would get more involved. But honestly, I don't know that they have the time or necessarily the understanding always. So I think it takes a village. So tap into all your resources, and definitely rely on your medical professionals if you have a good relationship with them. All right, so went through a lot of those. I will encourage you. Shoot me an email. I promise I will respond. I appreciate your time. I hope that this encourages you, not only from your own point of view, your families, but also with the clients and in your professional career, to really understand the importance of getting this conversation started and guiding our older adults to get their plan in place. So I thank you so much for your time, and I don't know if there is any final comments from ASA, so I will pipe down for a moment.
Thank you so much, April. This was such a great presentation.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, if you'd like to claim CEUs for today's web seminar, you'll receive a follow-up email by the end of the business day that will contain a link to the CEU application. That email will also contain a link where you can download today's slides. You'll have 60 days to claim CEUs for today's web seminar, and it will take 30 days from the date of your submission in order for us to process and issue your CE credit. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.